Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Podcast Aquatic, the official podcast of the Tennessee Aquarium. Today, let's talk about our latest addition to the aquarium, our newest gallery, Ridges to Rivers, which focuses a spotlight on the species of southern Appalachia, so basically our backyard here in Chattanooga. And I figured who better to talk about this exhibit, or this collection of exhibits, than two of the aquarists who were responsible for designing them and also for sourcing some of the animals who live there. So let's begin with Avery Millard. You're an aquarist too here at the aquarium.
Yes.
And Ben Stenger. Ben, you are a senior aquarist.
That's correct.
So why do we want people to know about the animals that live so close to us here in Chattanooga?
Yeah, so as it just so happens, East Tennessee is what we call a hotspot for aquatic biodiversity. In terms of temperate freshwater species, this area has the most of really anywhere that could be considered that type of habitat. For instance, in within the borders of Tennessee alone, there's about 315 species of freshwater fish, which is a phenomenal number.
So phenomenal. Put it in perspective, though. How many species would there be in, say, the whole country, to give people sort of an idea of how many are here?
Sure. So there's approximately 900 species of freshwater fish in the continental U.S. So you're already looking at, almost a third of this country's species within Tennessee. So it's a very dense amount of species for what is a relatively small area. And in terms of like temperate freshwater habitats, it's probably one of the most diverse in the world, and on par with a lot of tropical areas, which are usually known to have more species.
Yeah, so people tend to think of places like the Amazon and the Great Barrier Reef when they think of areas that are just full of multitudes of species.
Yeah, that's correct. So it's a really unique and important habitat, and there's a lot of different reasons for that. Really diverse geology within a small area, lack of historic glaciation, which let species diversify and thrive. But yeah, and not just fish, also invertebrates, salamanders. There's just a lot going on in our neck of the woods.
And so we decided a few years ago that it was time to redesign one of the sort of legacy galleries here at the aquarium, Discovery Hall, and walk us through what happened at that point. So you were both involved in that conversation, or I guess you came in maybe a little bit later, Avery, but Ben, you, I'm sure, were involved in that discussion, and also probably have had, I would guess, aims to do something like this for a while.
Yeah, I kind of have a reputation as being a bit of a native fish nerd. I took an interest on it really early on in my career. I think we knew that we wanted to revisit Discovery Hall. We liked the basic premise of getting to show native fish and have our sturgeon touch tank, which we knew we wanted to continue to do. But yeah, we knew that it was time to revisit that gallery. And so, I was presented with basically a loose blueprint about what the new gallery could look like, probably towards the end of 2019, I think. And one of the things that really got me excited was that we were going to have a new large stream exhibit, which is something that I've really wanted for a long time.
So let's talk about that exhibit, because that would be considered, and I think I've referred to it as such, the centerpiece of the gallery. So talk about dimensions, what we were trying to recreate. You say large stream exhibit, but that doesn't really do it justice, I think, that name.
Sure. And, we have other freshwater exhibits. We have the Cove, which is also, I think, technically really a stream exhibit. But that exhibit has certain limitations. We have to keep it cool year-round because that's what the trout that live in it need. Southern Appalachian brook trout are a big part of who we are and the type of fish we want to display. But it does, it was a little bit limiting as far as what we could do with other species of fish that are found around here.
So describe it to people. When you come in the gallery and you see this exhibit, what do you see first, and then how does it look as you sort of wander past it and look at it from the different sides?
When you first walk into the gallery, as you round the corner, you see kind of water cascading down. There's lots of live plants in there, and it's about an 18-foot long, about 1,500 gallon system, and it is half in the water, half out of the water. So it's kind of like a cross section of a stream. So you can really see all those natural behaviors, which you usually would only be able to see if you were snorkeling. Some of those things that the fish are doing, you can see them kind of up close and personal from a side view other than just a top down view, which is really makes it easier to see exactly what's going on.
Yeah, so when we were talking about this exhibit, I think the idea was to give people a chance to experience what the two of you get a chance to do kind of in the course of doing your professional work, but also kind of on the side, as you mentioned, snorkeling. So kind of giving them a snorkeler's perspective without the hassle of having to get wet or stuff yourself into a wetsuit.
Yeah, that's right. And one of the things we talked about, especially early on, is that we wanted this exhibit to be dynamic. You know, you say stream exhibit, but like that's doing a stream means you have to do moving water. And that's sort of raises the bar as far as difficulty a little bit because, you know, exhibits are what we call closed systems. If you go to a stream out in the wild, that's an open system. The stream kind of flows through the area, but there's a lot of factors at play, including geology and rain. In an aquarium, that's a closed system, which means that we control all the factors and the water has to go somewhere. And so if you put water in a box and you try to make it move, you have to give it a direction to go. You have to mold it, but you also have to take water physics into account. You know, we knew that we wanted it to be fast moving water. We also knew there's going to be a lot of challenges with that. You know, we wanted people to see the splashing and hear it. That's why we kept it as an open top tank as opposed to a closed top tank, because we wanted people to be able to get a sense that they were out. You know, if you're out in the wild, and you go to a stream, there's almost like this breeze that comes off it. And we wanted to give people kind of a sense of that and maybe hear it, smell it, you know, before they actually came up into it, kind of like, you know, in the wild. You get out of the car, you can hear the river, you can smell the forest.
Yeah, there's a reason why when people talk about water, they often use a lot of the same words that they use to describe people. They use words like babbling brook, a rushing stream. So people rush and people babble. And what you're talking about, I think you all captured pretty much perfectly. And that stream looks every bit as real as one you would find just 30 miles outside of Chattanooga up in the Appalachian Highlands.
Thanks. Yeah, that's what we were shooting for.
And it was so easy to do, too. I mean, there was very little work on your part to get there.
I think, it was a couple days where we had to work a little hard, but other than that, it was easy.
No, but seriously, let's talk about the process of actually designing the exhibit. And Avery, I'm going to let you sound off a little bit more here, too, because this really was something that did not just happen overnight. In fact, it didn't even happen over the course of not even a year. You began work on this long before guests were able to walk through the gallery, which opened in March of 2023. So it's been open for a little over a year. So go back to the origins of the exhibit in its prototypical phase.
Right. So we knew we were going to have to play around with different types of pumps and filtration and dimensions of the tank. We knew the footprint that we had available to us to be able to fit all of our rock work and landscaping into, but we had to really kind of model that and shape that in a prototype model. And we were lucky enough to be able to do a lot of R&D on it beforehand because it would not look as good as it does without that opportunity. So we actually were able to build a one-to-one model out at our offsite facility of it, and it was made of plywood and just a sealant. And then we just played around with putting water in it, plumbing it, just like we have on the stream now. And then we were taking like literal just cinder blocks and bags of sand and rocks and gravel and moving them around and stacking them up. We kind of had some ideas of the different types of microhabitats we wanted to display in there. So we were really trying to fit 3 or 4 different microhabitats into the final product.
So when you say microhabitats, give a definition for that.
Right. So when you go out into a stream, that whole, like the stream habitat is one big habitat, but then within the stream itself, you have lots of different types of depths and flows and temperatures, different amounts of sunlight, different types of plants, and different fish and animals like to live in different parts of the stream. So we like to say that those fish live in specific microhabitats, kind of a habitat within a habitat. So for instance, we wanted to focus in on a plunge pool section where you would have kind of like strong swimming fish, like bigger fish. And that's where a lot of our fish are congregating that are kind of the better swimmers. A lot of our sucker species like to congregate in there. And then the stream goes a little bit shallower for a riffle section, which is a shallow and fast moving section. And that's where our tangerine darters like to hang out. And a lot of our darters, which is what you would see in the wild. And then we have a run section, which is where our river chub is building his mound right now. So we really wanted to focus on that. That's just a little bit deeper, fast moving section.
And we'll get back to that chub because that's one of the cool things that's come out of this exhibit in the first year of its operation. And I think kind of a culmination of the envisioning process and what our ambitions were for this gallery. But the microhabitats you mentioned, I think are probably the reason why it's so difficult to create an exhibit like what the two of you and the rest of the team involved in this managed to accomplish, which is because it's so dynamic, like that dynamism that you were mentioning, Ben, and all those microhabitats. To have a real stream, you have to have that dynamism, and you have to have all of those different places for all those different species to live that kind of cater to their individual wants and needs. And did at any point working with that prototype ever feel like we're just never going to be able to do this? We're never going to have a one-to-one artificial system that mimics the wild.
Yeah, we did feel like that sometimes. Mm-hmm.
So what were the pinch points? What were the difficult things and challenges involved in achieving the end goal?
Tom Demas, our vice president of exhibits, he had the foresight to know how challenging this was going to be. He's done a lot of exhibits in his time, and he knew that doing an exhibit like this was going to require us to make some mistakes, maybe. But you don't want to make those mistakes as the concrete for the exhibit is getting poured. It's a bad time to figure stuff out. Concrete sets very fast. So our leadership team had the foresight to know that we were going to need to play around with this a little bit. And so Jeff Worley, our exhibit designer, he worked up this really cool clay model of what the general look of the exhibit would be. We used his model to sort of build the bones of the exhibit out at the warehouse. And also shout outs to our maintenance team for making it happen. I mean, we literally just threw together this system out of plywood and pond liner. I still can't believe it. I see it like once a week and I just shake my head. So without them doing that, this whole thing doesn't really happen. And then I think once it started to take shape a little bit, as it went on, it seemed like, okay, maybe this is doable, but we ran into a lot of hiccups along the way. The first pump that we spec'd out for the exhibit wasn't strong enough. The second pump we spec'd out also didn't get the results we wanted. And it wasn't until we hooked up both the pumps and played around with side jets that we were able to get a result that we actually felt really good about. If we hadn't done that, it would have been a much different result.
Yeah, if you think about like streams out in the wild, streams come from mountains a lot of the time, especially in our area, and they just have thousands of feet of vertical drop to build up that energy to get that rushing thing that the fish like, and also that make it function as a stream. And that fast, cold water is what they've adapted to and what they need. So getting it to look like a stream as far as the water movement goes was our biggest problem.
And not just pushing the water, but also giving that water somewhere to go where it didn't mitigate everything we had done upstream. Yeah, and it was sometimes it was a matter of just inches or a certain rock here or a certain rock there that made a big difference. And the fact that we got to get our hands dirty and play with that before the exhibit opened, that's such a luxury. And it made a big difference. I felt like once the exhibit was up and running, it kind of already felt familiar where stuff was at. We put fish in the test system too, so we kind of saw to some degree what was going to happen. It's not something you want to leave to chance if you don't have to.
let's talk about some of the animals that live in this exhibit. And Avery, I guess this is really more, the ball's kind of more in your court on this, because you are the day-to-day caretaker of the large stream exhibit. So what animals can people see?
So we've got 26 different species of fish in there right now. Right now it's just fish. So we've got our big ones that you're going to see. Our mascot of the gallery is the tangerine darter. They're very gregarious, very out in front. They're a large darter species, and they're bright orange, and they have a black stripe down their side. But then we've got lots of smaller darter species, gilt darters, redline darters, lots of greenside darters. And those guys are a little bit smaller, and they really like to hide out under rocks and kind of pop out and grab a shrimp as it's floating by if they're eating. You might not see them all the time, but they're really beautiful. If you just stop and look in front of the tank, you'll see little guys kind of sitting on the bottom and darting out from underneath rocks.
Okay, so Avery, one of the cool things that has happened recently that I think a lot of us would consider sort of the culmination in terms of raising awareness of how special the Southeast is, it happened in the large stream exhibit. So talk a little bit about the river chub that we've kind of name dropped in the course of this conversation, and what exactly happened that we all got so excited about.
Right, so part of river chubs, which is a large minnow species, natural history is to dig out a pit when it's time for breeding season. The male will dig out a pit of pebbles and then go and collect hundreds of pebbles from around the stream that he's living in and build a mound. There's really no better way to put it, but it's really good for their eggs, and then that will entice female river chubs to come by, lay their eggs there. And right now we've got our river chub, and he's got tubercles on his head, which looks kind of like bumps, sort of, but that's a breeding condition for him. So he's building a river chub mound in there. But those also attract other species of minnows, like our saffron shiners that we have in the tank and our Tennessee shiners that we have with them. They also will utilize that strategy. And the reason that they build the mounds is when their eggs are in there, they're protected from predators, and they also get a lot of high oxygen flow through them, so that is better for their eggs, so they don't get any type of fungus or anything like that on them. So really the other minnows are just taking advantage of that.
They're piggybacking.
Yeah, they're piggybacking. You see it all the time in nature. When we drive by the Tellico, you can see them from the road. Some of those mounds are so big out there, and you'll see the bright red saffron shiners even from the bank before you even get in the water. But this has been just like really proof that if you just mimic nature as close as you can, then hopefully the fish will feel at home enough to just mimic those behaviors that happen really every day. But it's just really cool to see it happen in something that we built.
And so one of the cool things about this exhibit, there are so many hurdles to clear to creating an ecosystem indoors that behaves like one out in the wild. And one of the ones that, just from talking to the two of you, I know is so important is the seasonality of an exhibit, because so many of the kinds of things that you're talking about are really determined by or triggered by the changing of the seasons, right?
Yeah, so out in nature, we usually have somewhat of a winter around here in the southern Appalachians, but the water temperature will drop into sometimes the low 50s, and the fish really aren't doing much except for trying to get by. Then once that water starts warming up and the day length gets longer, you'll see those cues for reproduction for them. Much like other members of the animal kingdom, like male birds as well, they get this really beautiful coloration on them. They get different types of morphological things like tubercles, like I was saying. Striped shiners will get tubercles all the way down their sides, as well as stone rollers will too. But it's just a really cool thing to see. It's like the changing of the seasons. The flowers come out, the fish color up, the birds color up. It's just a really cool part of our ecosystem down here.
Yeah, they look almost like little underwater jewels. In fact, some of them they get so colored up that when we take photos of them or make videos of them, I almost have to double check our settings to make sure that we haven't accidentally turned the saturation up too much. And the rainbow shiners, when they hit their peak coloration, they almost hurt your eyes to look at. They're so intensely colored up.
Yeah, they look like one of like the kind of like artificially bred species that you would see like in a pet store, but they're not. That is what they actually look like. They're really cool.
The crazy thing is that you could live 5 miles away from that and have no idea that it's there. You know, you can see flowers from your window, you can see birds from the bird feeder, but unless you actually stick your face in the water, it's pretty easy to miss that, and it's right in your backyard.
I guess that kind of goes back to the heart and soul of why we wanted to do this initially, which was to give people that opportunity to see and, through seeing, appreciate the biodiversity that you mentioned when we started this episode. That is at the kind of the core of why we think this place that we live in is so special.
I love going out to see that stuff, but it's not for everybody. It's cold. It's, you know, it's kind of a pain. And it's, you know, not everyone wants to go do that, but we think it's really important that people get a chance to go see that. And so it's, for us, really, really rewarding to be able to bring that to the people. And it almost feels like a service that we could provide.
Yeah, it's hard to want to protect something that you don't appreciate, and it's hard to appreciate something that you've never seen.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And for a lot of people, I feel like just from talking amongst ourselves, opening the gallery in and of itself was really the realization of an ambition and a dream that many people have had for their entire career in some cases. And I know that you're one of them who've had that sort of ambition to do something like this. So how does it feel to actually have a space that recreates the places in the wild that you obviously are so drawn to and that you think are so special?
Yeah, obviously it's really satisfying, but I think my favorite part has been walking by the exhibit and hearing somebody else talk to other people about it. I think it's sort of, you know, whenever we started to get ready to do this gallery, we tried to take other people out to the wild to go see this stuff, and then to see those people get excited and help us with the exhibit. And then once the exhibit was going and we've had, you know, these breeding events, having other people see that with their own eyes, it really, I think it changes, it turns people into advocates. And so now my favorite thing is that I can just sit back and other people are saying the same things I would, and it feels like it's almost kind of spread like wildfire, you know? And I think the difference is being able to see that with your own eyes.
So when that chub built his nest, the moment that was so exciting for a lot of us was the response on a community level. Mm-hmm. So the Tennessee Days, the Tennessee Shiners, and what was the other species? Saffron Shiners?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all started doing exactly what you're talking about, but not out in the wild. They were doing it 35 feet in the air in the middle of downtown Chattanooga inside of an artificial stream.
Yeah.
And that moment, I think, just from talking to you, I think it's fair to say that the two of you would kind of characterize that as a magic moment.
Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm. It's magical to me. I don't know. Yeah, it's, you know, at our core, that's kind of what our job is, right? Is to take slices of nature and bring them here and sort of care for them and for public display. And the fact that we can take a moment in time that happens out in the wild and bring it to our guest is really neat. It's, yeah, magical. It's magical.
Did it ever feel in the course of doing all this? I mean, that I think we would all sort of say that was the ultimate goal. Did you ever think that A, it would happen, or B, that it would happen, you know, so early in the lifetime of this exhibit?
I was pretty surprised to see. I mean, we did spend a lot of time kind of researching where they like to live, but with a lot of fish, when you kind of put them somewhere where maybe on some level they know that that's not where they're supposed to be. It's like a really big challenge, is making fish behave in a closed system in an aquarium like they would in the wild. So just for it to happen the first year felt like the really the luck of the draw. That it felt surreal walking around the corner and seeing that they were actually like as bright red as they are when we see them in the Tellico. I think that was the most surprising thing, that they really did think that it was just springtime out in the Smokies.
Yeah, I certainly don't take it for granted that it happened. You know, we obviously put a lot of work in, and that shows, but until I saw it for the first time, I wasn't gonna believe quite yet.
Maybe we're pessimists. Maybe that's our problem.
I mean, I think we're problem solvers, and until the problem is solved, we assume it hasn't been solved. But no, I mean, we did everything that we thought it was going to take. Avery ramped down the temperature on our schedule, and our operations team helped us with that. And, we maybe reduced the feedings a little bit to mimic wintertime when food's a little scarcer. We did everything we thought was necessary to do it, and then let them winter for a little bit, and then slowly ramped everything up. And, so far, so good.
There's actually a lot more to the gallery than we've talked about. As you mentioned earlier, alluded to earlier, the Lake Sturgeon Touch exhibit, Sturgeon Bend, was massively expanded as a course of creating this gallery. So there is a lot to see and a lot more to cover than even we've had a chance to cover in this conversation. So if you're listening, I would invite you to come to the aquarium and explore this gallery, because it is the kind of experience that, again, if you're not in a position to put on a wetsuit and put on a dive mask and brave 58-degree water, you're not likely to see these things for yourself. So having an entire gallery that really emphasizes why the Southeast, and in particular this part of the Southeast, is so special is a great thing to experience in person. I would congratulate the two of you on managing to make this happen, kind of against all odds, it seems like.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. But I mean, it wasn't just us. It was a whole team here of incredibly talented, passionate people. And I think my favorite part was just getting to work with all of them and make something cool happen.
Well, if you want to make something cool happen and you have an idea for a future episode of the Podcast Aquatic, or would just like to ask a question of one of our experts, we will always accept suggestions and give you the answers that you're looking for. So send us an email at podcast@tnaqua.org. In the meantime, thank you for listening, and we will see you next time on the Podcast Aquatic.